New York City buzzed with life on a chilly Friday night. The streets of Manhattan glowed under neon lights, and the air carried the hum of taxis and laughter from crowded bars. Inside one of those bars, a sleek spot called the Velvet Room, Isabel Bennett sat alone at the counter. She swirled a glass of whiskey in her hand, her dark hair falling over her shoulders. At 28, Isabel was no stranger to pressure. As the sole heir to Bennett Enterprises, a family empire built on real estate and luxury goods, she carried the weight of her late mother's legacy, but tonight that weight felt heavier than ever. Her grandfather, George Bennett, had given her an ultimatum: marry soon or risk losing control of the company to distant cousins who cared more about profit than heritage. Isabel took a sip, the burn of the liquor matching the fire in her chest. She hated ultimatums. She hated men who thought they could control her even more. 5 years with Trevor Miles had taught her that lesson the hard way. He had charmed her, promised her forever, then betrayed her for her family's money. Now, she trusted no one. Across the room, Jasper Donovan watched her quietly. To everyone else, he was just another guy in a worn jacket, nursing a beer at a corner table. No one would guess he was the billionaire CEO of Donovan Corporation, a powerhouse in New York's business world. Jasper had his own problems. Rivals within his company were plotting to oust him, and his advisors had urged him to lay low, disguise himself as an ordinary man until the storm passed. So here he was, blending into the crowd, his sharp green eyes hidden behind a pair of cheap glasses. But when he saw Isabel, something shifted. She wasn't just beautiful. There was a spark in her, a mix of defiance and sadness that pulled him in. He couldn't look away. Isabel caught his stare and frowned. She was used to men gawking, but this one didn't leer. He just watched, steady and calm. It annoyed her. She downed her drink, the room spinning slightly, and decided to do something reckless. She stood, walked over to his table, and stopped in front of him. The bar's noise faded as she locked eyes with him. "What's your deal?" she asked, her voice sharp. Jasper blinked, caught off guard. "Just sitting here," he said simply, his tone soft but steady. She smirked, the whiskey fueling her boldness. "You look like you've got something to prove. Do you?" He tilted his head, curious. "Maybe. Depends on what you're asking." Isabel laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Men always think they're worth something. Prove it then." Before he could respond, she shrugged off her coat, letting it fall to the floor. Underneath, she wore a thin silk blouse, the fabric clinging to her frame in the dim light. A few heads turned, but she didn't care. She wanted to see what the stranger would do. Would he flinch, stare, run? Jasper didn't move. His gaze stayed on her face, not her body, and a faint smile tugged at his lips. "You're trouble," he said almost to himself. She raised an eyebrow. "And you're not? If you're a real man, show me." Her words were a challenge, a dare born from too much liquor and too little trust. Jasper stood slowly, his height surprising her. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the faint cedar of his cologne. "What's your name?" he asked. "Isabel," she said, her chin lifting. "And yours?" "Jasper," he replied, no hesitation. She smirked again. "Jasper? Sounds like a guy who's got nothing to lose. How about this? Marry me tonight, right now. Prove you're not just another coward." It was a wild, absurd idea, something to shake off the chains of her life for a moment. She expected him to laugh or back away. Instead, he looked at her, really looked, and said, "Okay." The next hour blurred into chaos. They stumbled out of the bar, her coat forgotten, and found a tiny chapel a few blocks away. New York had places like that, relics of impulsive nights and fleeting promises. A sleepy clerk handed them a form, and Jasper signed it with a steady hand. Isabel scrawled her name, giggling at the madness of it all. The officiant, an older man with tired eyes, muttered a quick ceremony. "Do you take this woman?" "I do," Jasper said, his voice low. "Do you take this man?" "Sure, why not?" Isabel slurred, grinning. Rings were exchanged, cheap bands from a vending machine nearby. Then it was done. They were married. When the fog of alcohol lifted, Isabel woke up in a small apartment in Queens. Sunlight streamed through a cracked window, and the smell of coffee filled the air. She sat up on a lumpy couch, her head pounding, and saw Jasper in the kitchen. He wore the same jacket from last night, flipping a pancake with a goofy smile. "Morning, wife," he said, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Isabel froze. Her eyes darted to her hand where a flimsy ring glinted. She grabbed her purse, found the marriage certificate, and stared at it. Isabel Bennett and Jasper Donovan, legally wed. Her stomach dropped. "What the hell did we do?" she whispered, looking at him. He turned, still smiling. "Got married. Want breakfast?" She stood, clutching the paper. "This is insane. You're insane. Who are you?" Jasper shrugged, plating the pancake. "Just a guy. Live here, work odd jobs, nothing special." His casual tone only made her angrier. She stepped closer, studying him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a quiet confidence that didn't match his story. "Odd jobs? In Queens? And you just marry a stranger?" He met her gaze, unflinching. "You asked me to. I don't back down from a challenge." Isabel opened her mouth, then closed it. She couldn't argue with that. Last night she'd thrown the dare at him and he'd caught it. But now what? She was married to a man she didn't know, a man who seemed too calm, too steady for the mess she'd dragged him into. Her phone buzzed. A text from George. "Come home. We need to talk about the company." Isabel groaned. She looked at Jasper, flipping another pancake like nothing had happened. "This isn't over," she said, grabbing her bag. "We're fixing this." He nodded, unfazed. "Sure, but eat first. You look like you need it." She glared, but her stomach growled, betraying her. She sat, took the plate, and ate in silence. The pancake was warm, fluffy, better than it had any right to be, and as she watched him hum to himself, she couldn't shake the feeling that Jasper Donovan was more than he let on. For the first time in years, Isabel felt a flicker of something dangerous. Curiosity, maybe even hope. Isabel Bennett stepped out of Jasper Donovan's cramped Queens apartment, the marriage certificate crumpled in her purse. The morning air was crisp, and the streets buzzed with early commuters. She hailed a cab, her mind racing. She had married a stranger, a man who lived in a rundown building, cooked pancakes like a pro, and acted as if tying the knot with her was no big deal. It didn't add up. She glanced back at the faded brick facade, half expecting him to chase after her. He didn't. The cab pulled away, and Isabel leaned back, rubbing her temples. She needed to undo this mess, but first, she had to face her grandfather. Back at the Bennett family penthouse in Manhattan, George Bennett sat in his leather armchair, a newspaper spread across his lap. At 75, he was still sharp, his gray eyes piercing through anyone who dared defy him. Isabel walked in, bracing herself. "You're late," George said, not looking up. "Had a long night?" she replied, dropping her bag on the couch. He folded the paper, peering at her over his glasses. "You look like hell. What's going on?" Isabel hesitated. She could lie, say she'd been working late, but George had a way of sniffing out the truth. "I got married," she blurted. His eyebrows shot up. "Married to who?" She swallowed. "Some guy. Jasper Donovan. It was a stupid mistake." George leaned forward, intrigued. "Donovan? Never heard of him. What does he do?" Isabel shrugged. "Odd jobs, he says. Lives in Queens. I don't know much else." George frowned, then chuckled. "Queens? You married a nobody? Well, at least he's not one of those Wall Street sharks circling you for the company. Bring him here. I want to meet him. It's getting annulled." George waved a hand. "Nonsense. You're married now. Make it work. The board's watching, Isabel. A husband might steady things." She stared at him, incredulous. This was her life, not a business deal. But arguing with George was like arguing with a brick wall. She stormed out, vowing to fix this herself. Meanwhile, Jasper stood in his tiny kitchen, washing the breakfast dishes. He smiled to himself, thinking of Isabel's fiery exit. She was a whirlwind, all sharp edges and hidden softness. He hadn't planned to marry her, but when she'd thrown that challenge at him, something clicked. He'd been hiding for weeks, dodging the power plays at Donovan Corporation, and she was the first real thing he'd stumbled into. His phone buzzed. It was his assistant, Michael Reed, a no-nonsense guy who'd been with him for years. "Boss, you're still in Queens?" Michael asked. "Yeah," Jasper said, drying his hands. "And I got married last night." Silence. Then, "You what? To who?" "Isabel Bennett," Jasper said casually. Michael groaned. "Bennett Enterprises? Are you insane? She's a target. If your rivals find out, they'll use her against you." Jasper grinned. "Let them try. She's tougher than she looks." Back in Manhattan, Isabel couldn't shake Jasper from her mind. She spent the day at Bennett Enterprises buried in meetings, but her thoughts kept drifting. Who was he really? A guy doing odd jobs? Didn't just marry a stranger without blinking? That night she returned to Queens, determined to get answers. She knocked on his door, and he opened it, wearing an apron smeared with flour. "Hey, wife," he said, grinning. "Hungry?" She stepped inside, ignoring the flutter in her chest. "We need to talk," she said, crossing her arms. He nodded, pulling a tray of cookies from the oven. "Sure, want one?" The smell was heavenly, and her resolve wavered. She took a cookie, biting into it. Warm, soft, perfect. "How do you do this?" she asked, annoyed at how good it was. "Practice," he said, leaning against the counter. "Grew up cooking with my mom." Isabel studied him. His apartment was sparse. A couch, a small TV, a stack of books. But there was something off. The books were on finance and strategy, not the kind of thing an odd job guy would read. "You're not adding up," she said. "You live like this, but you cook like a chef, and you don't freak out about marrying me. What's your story?" Jasper shrugged. "No story. Just me?" She narrowed her eyes. "I don't buy it, but fine. My grandfather wants to meet you tomorrow. Don't embarrass me." He nodded. "Wouldn't dream of it." She turned to leave, but he called after her. "Isabel!" She paused. "You look pretty when you're mad," he said, his voice soft. She rolled her eyes, but her cheeks warmed. "Save it," she muttered, walking out. The next day, Jasper showed up at the penthouse in a clean shirt and jeans, still playing the simple guy. George sized him up, gruff but curious. "So, you're the husband," he said. "What do you do?" "Bit of this, bit of that," Jasper replied, hands in his pockets. "Keep things running." George grunted. "Honest work, good. Isabel needs someone steady." "Don't mess this up." Jasper smiled. "I won't." Isabel watched, torn between irritation and amusement. He was good at this, whatever this was. After George left the room, she cornered him. "You're too calm," she said. "Most guys would run from my family." He looked at her, green eyes steady. "I'm not most guys." That night, everything shifted. Isabel was working late at the office when Jasper showed up, soaked from the rain. He carried an umbrella and a bag of takeout. "Thought you might be hungry," he said, setting it on her desk. She stared, caught off guard. "Why are you here?" she asked. "You didn't eat," he said simply. "Can't have my wife starving." She wanted to snap at him, tell him she didn't need this. But the gesture hit her hard. No one had ever just shown up for her like that. She took the food and they ate in silence, rain tapping the windows. For a moment, she let herself feel safe. But the peace didn't last. The next morning, a package arrived at her office. Inside was a silver necklace from Tiffany's, delicate and stunning, with a note. "For my wife, Jasper." Isabel's jaw dropped. It was worth thousands, far beyond what an odd job guy could afford. She stormed back to Queens, banging on his door. He opened it, mid-bite into a sandwich. "You like it?" he asked, grinning. "How did you pay for this?" she demanded. He shrugged. "Saved up. Took a while." She didn't believe him. "You're lying," she said. "No one saves that much doing odd jobs." He set the sandwich down, stepping closer. "Maybe I'm good at saving," he said, his voice low. She glared, but her pulse quickened. He was too close, too real. Before she could push further, her phone rang. It was her assistant, Claire. "Isabel, Trevor Miles is back in town. He's asking about you." Isabel's stomach twisted. Trevor, the man who'd broken her heart, was sniffing around again. She hung up, looking at Jasper. "Trouble?" he asked, his tone gentle. "Nothing you need to worry about," she said, but her voice shook. He nodded, not pressing. "I'm here if you need me," he said. She left, rattled. Trevor's return meant danger, and Jasper's secrets were piling up. She couldn't trust either of them, but Jasper's quiet presence lingered in her mind. Days later, she caught him fixing a leaky faucet in his apartment. Sleeves rolled up, hands steady. He looked up, grinning. "Want to help?" She didn't, but she sat anyway, watching. He hummed a tune, fumbling with a wrench like he'd never held one before. It was almost funny until he fixed it perfectly. "You're full of surprises," she said. "Good ones, I hope," he replied, wiping his hands. She didn't answer, but something softened in her. He was a puzzle, one she couldn't solve yet. Then came the real shock. She found a receipt in his jacket pocket, slipped out when he tossed it on the couch. It was for the necklace, paid in cash, no name attached, but the amount was staggering. Isabel's breath caught. Who was Jasper Donovan? She confronted him that night, holding the receipt. "Explain this," she said. He looked at it, then at her. "I told you, saved up." She shook her head. "Stop lying. No one in Queens has that kind of cash." He stepped closer, his smile fading. "Maybe I'm not what you think," he said softly, "but I'm still your husband." Isabel's heart pounded. She wanted to push him away, but his words held her there. She left without another word, the mystery of Jasper Donovan burning in her chest. Isabel Bennett sat in her office at Bennett Enterprises, staring at the Tiffany's necklace Jasper Donovan had given her. It rested on her desk, a shimmering question mark. She couldn't figure him out. He lived in a shabby Queens apartment, claimed to scrape by on odd jobs, yet dropped thousands on a gift like this. And the way he looked at her, steady and warm, chipped away at the walls she'd built since Trevor Miles shattered her trust 5 years ago. She pushed the necklace aside, focusing on the stack of contracts in front of her. Work was her anchor. She wouldn't let some mystery husband pull her under. Her phone buzzed, breaking her focus. It was George Bennett, her grandfather. "Dinner tonight," he said gruffly. "Bring that husband of yours. No excuses." Isabel sighed. "Grandpa, I told you, it's temporary." George snorted. "Temporary or not, he's family now. 7 o'clock. Don't be late." He hung up before she could argue. Isabel rubbed her forehead. George had latched onto Jasper like he was the answer to all her problems. She didn't know how to tell him she planned to annul this marriage as soon as she could, or that she wasn't even sure who Jasper really was. That evening, Jasper arrived at the Bennett penthouse with a paper bag in hand. Isabel met him at the door, her arms crossed. "What's that?" she asked, nodding at the bag. He grinned, pulling out a homemade pie. "Dessert. Figured it'd help." She rolled her eyes, but couldn't hide a flicker of amusement. "You're too good at this," she muttered, leading him inside. George was waiting in the dining room, his presence filling the space. He eyed Jasper up and down, then grunted. "You clean up nice," he said. Jasper, in a simple button-up shirt, nodded. "Thanks, sir." George waved a hand. "Call me George. Sit." Dinner was tense. George grilled Jasper about his life, and Jasper answered with vague charm. "Grew up in a small town," he said, cutting into his steak. "Moved here, found work where I could." Isabel watched, waiting for him to slip. He didn't. George seemed pleased. "Honest man," he said, nodding at Isabel. "You could have done worse." She forced a smile. "Sure." After dessert, George pulled her aside. "I like him," he said. "Keeps you grounded." "Don't mess this up," Isabel bristled. "It's not real, Grandpa. It was a drunken mistake." George's eyes hardened. "Real or not, the board's restless. A husband shows stability. Keep him around, at least until things settle." She wanted to scream, but she nodded. George didn't budge once he'd made up his mind. Later, as they left the penthouse, Jasper walked her to her car. "He's tough," he said, hands in his pockets. "But he cares about you." Isabel stopped, turning to him. Don't act like you know us. This isn't your world. Jasper's smile faded. Maybe not, but I'm here. She looked away, unsettled by his sincerity. He was too easy to like, and that scared her. She drove off, leaving him standing in the glow of the streetlights. The next morning, Isabel felt off. Her stomach churned and a wave of nausea hit her in the office bathroom. She gripped the sink, staring at her reflection. It couldn't be. She hadn't been with anyone since Trevor, months before that night at the bar with Jasper. Panic crept in. She slipped out, bought a pregnancy test from a corner pharmacy, and locked herself in her office. 2 pink lines stared back at her. Pregnant. Her mind spun. It had to be Trevor's. The timing didn't match Jasper, not yet. She sank into her chair, hands trembling. She couldn't tell anyone. Not George. Not Jasper. This was her burden, and she'd carry it alone. That night, trouble found her. She attended a charity gala in the Hamptons, a glittering event packed with New York's elite. Jasper insisted on coming, showing up in a borrowed suit that somehow fit him perfectly. Isabel avoided him, mingling with clients, until a familiar voice cut through the crowd. "Isabel Bennett," Trevor Miles said, stepping into her path. He looked the same, slick and handsome, but his eyes were cold. "Miss me?" She stiffened. "Get lost, Trevor." He smirked. "Heard you got hitched, some nobody from Queens. Slumming it, huh?" Before she could snap back, Jasper appeared at her side. "Problem?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. Trevor laughed. "Who's this, your guard dog?" Jasper didn't flinch. "Her husband." The air thickened. Trevor leaned in, voice low. "She'll dump you soon enough. She always does." Isabel's fists clenched, but Jasper stepped forward, blocking Trevor. "Walk away," he said, quiet but sharp. Trevor sneered, then sauntered off. Isabel turned to Jasper, furious. "I don't need you fighting my battles." He shrugged. "Didn't fight, just stood there." She glared, but her anger faltered. He hadn't backed down, hadn't made a scene, just stood by her. It rattled her more than she'd admit. The gala took a worse turn. Vanessa Pierce, a socialite with a reputation for getting what she wanted, zeroed in on Jasper. She glided over, her red dress hugging her curves, and flashed a dazzling smile. "You must be Isabel's mystery man," she purred, touching his arm. "I'm Vanessa. We should talk." Isabel watched, her stomach twisting. Not jealousy, she told herself. Annoyance. Jasper smiled politely. "Nice to meet you." "I'm with my wife." Vanessa laughed, undeterred. "Wives come and go. Call me if you get bored." She slipped him her card and walked away, hips swaying. Isabel snatched the card from his hand and tore it up. "Don't even think about it," she snapped. He raised an eyebrow. "Wasn't going to." She stormed off, hating how much it bothered her. Rumors spread fast. By the next day, whispers reached her ears. Trevor had planted a story. Isabel was cheating on her new husband back with her ex. Colleagues shot her sidelong glances, and her assistant, Claire, pulled her aside. "People are talking," Claire said. "It's nonsense, right?" Isabel nodded, but her chest tightened. She couldn't let this touch Bennett Enterprises. She tracked Jasper down at his apartment, finding him tinkering with a broken lamp. "Trevor's spreading lies," she said, pacing. "Says I'm with him again." Jasper set the lamp down, frowning. "You're not, though." She stopped, meeting his gaze. "Of course not. But it's a mess. I can't have this hitting the company." He stood, wiping his hands on a rag. "What do you need?" She hesitated. "Just stay out of it. I'll handle him." Jasper nodded, but his eyes said he wouldn't sit idle. That night, he showed up at her office again, this time with a thermos of soup. "You're stressed," he said, pouring her a cup. "Drink." She took it, the warmth seeping into her hands. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "Yeah, I do," he replied. "You're my wife." The word hung between them, heavy and real. She sipped the soup, her walls cracking just a little. Days later, the pregnancy weighed on her. She went to a clinic, confirming it, 6 weeks. Too early for Jasper, too late to ignore. It was Trevor's, a remnant of her past she couldn't escape. She sat in her car, tears stinging her eyes. She couldn't keep it, not with everything falling apart. But the thought of ending it hurt more than she expected. She drove to Jasper's, needing something, anything, to ground her. He opened the door, concern flashing across his face. "You okay?" he asked. She shook her head, stepping inside. "No, but don't ask." He didn't. Instead, he handed her a blanket and sat with her on the couch, silent. His presence was steady, a lifeline she didn't deserve. The breaking point came at a board meeting. George called her in, his face grim. "Rumors are out of control," he said. "Fix it, Isabel, or I'll fix it for you." She nodded, exhausted. That night she told Jasper everything, except the pregnancy. "Trevor's ruining me," she said. "And I don't trust you either. You're hiding something." He looked at her, pained. "I'm not your enemy," he said. "But you don't trust anyone, do you?" She stood, tears threatening. "I can't. Not after Trevor. Not after any of this." She left, slamming the door. She couldn't stay with him. Not with a baby tying her to the past and a husband she couldn't read. But as she walked away, Jasper's quiet strength haunted her. She was running, but from what? Isabel Bennett stood in the grand ballroom of the Hudson Yards Gala, her black dress shimmering under the chandeliers. The event, hosted by Donovan Corporation, was the talk of New York's elite. She'd come alone, leaving Jasper Donovan behind in Queens. Her fight with him still stung, his words echoing in her mind. "I'm not your enemy." She wanted to believe him, but trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not with Trevor Miles lurking, not with a baby growing inside her that she couldn't face. She clutched her glass of water, pretending it was wine, and scanned the room. Business tycoons mingled, their laughter a dull roar. She was here to save Bennett Enterprises from the rumors Trevor had spread, not to unravel her tangled heart. The lights dimmed and a hush fell over the crowd. A man stepped onto the stage, tall and commanding in a tailored suit. Isabel froze. It was Jasper. Not the Jasper she knew with his worn jackets and goofy grins, but a polished version, his green eyes sharp and unwavering. Whispers rippled through the room as he took the microphone. "Good evening," he said, his voice steady. "I'm Jasper Donovan, CEO of Donovan Corporation. Thank you for joining us tonight." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Isabel's glass slipped, splashing water on her dress. CEO? Her husband? Her head spun. He'd lied. All this time he'd been hiding this. Jasper's gaze found her across the room. "There's been speculation about me," he continued. "Who I am, what I want. Let me be clear. This company is my life, and so is my wife." He paused, locking eyes with her. "Isabel Bennett is my wife, and I'll protect her with everything I have." The room gasped. Isabel's legs trembled. He was claiming her publicly in front of New York's power players. She wanted to run, to scream, but she couldn't move. Trevor emerged from the crowd, smirking. "Nice story," he called out. "Too bad she's still mine." The lie hit like a punch, and the crowd buzzed. Jasper's jaw tightened, but he didn't falter. "Step aside, Miles," he said, cold and firm. Trevor laughed and disappeared into the throng. Isabel stormed backstage after the speech, finding Jasper alone, loosening his tie. "What was that?" she demanded. He turned, calm as ever. "The truth." She laughed bitterly. "The truth? You've been lying since the night we met. CEO? You let me think you were nothing." He stepped closer, his voice low. "I didn't want you to see me as a title. I wanted you to see me." She shook her head, tears burning. "I don't know you. And now this, you've made me a target." He reached for her, but she pulled back. "I'm fixing it," he said. "Trust me." She glared. "I can't." The night spiraled further. Trevor cornered her outside the venue, his smile venomous. "You're in deep now," he said. "But I can help. Get me Donovan's bid for Hudson Yards, one file, and I'll bury the rumors." Isabel stared, horrified. You're insane. He leaned in, breath hot on her face. Do it, or I tell the world you're carrying my kid. They'll eat you alive. Her hand flew to her stomach, fear clawing at her. He knew. How? She hadn't told anyone. You're bluffing, she said, voice shaking. He smirked. Try me. He walked away, leaving her reeling. She couldn't give him the bid. It would ruin Jasper, ruin everything. But the rumors, the baby, her company, all hung in the balance. She returned to the gala, mind racing. Jasper found her, his suit jacket off, sleeves rolled up. You're pale, he said, frowning. What happened? She shook her head. Nothing. He didn't buy it, but he didn't push. Stay close, he said. Something's off. She nodded, too shaken to argue. Hours later, as the event wound down, she slipped away to clear her head. The parking garage was quiet, shadows stretching across the concrete. Footsteps echoed behind her. She turned, and 3 men emerged, faces hard. Bennett, one growled. Miles says hello. Her heart stopped. She backed away, fumbling for her phone. Stay back, she warned, dialing Jasper. Help, she whispered when he answered. Garage, now. The men lunged. Isabel swung her purse, hitting one, but another grabbed her arm, twisting it. Pain shot through her, and she screamed. Then Jasper was there, a blur of motion. He tackled the biggest guy, fists flying. Get off her, he yelled, slamming the man into a car. The second thug swung at him, and Jasper ducked, landing a solid punch. Blood streaked his knuckles, but he didn't stop. The third man bolted, and Jasper turned to the one holding Isabel. Let her go, he said, voice deadly. The guy hesitated, then shoved her aside and ran. Isabel stumbled, catching herself against a pillar. Jasper rushed to her, breathing hard. You okay? He asked, hands on her shoulders. She nodded, trembling. You're hurt, she said, seeing the gash on his forehead. He ignored it, pulling her close. I've got you, he said, his voice breaking. Security arrived, too late, and the attackers were gone. Jasper slumped against a car, blood dripping down his face. Isabel knelt beside him, panic rising. Stay with me, she said, pressing her scarf to his wound. He smiled weakly. Not going anywhere. Then his eyes fluttered shut, and he collapsed. She screamed his name, shaking him. An ambulance screeched into the garage, and paramedics swarmed. They loaded him onto a stretcher, and Isabel followed, her dress stained with his blood. At the hospital, she paced the waiting room, guilt gnawing at her. He'd risked everything for her, and she'd pushed him away. The doctor emerged hours later. Moderate concussion, he said. He took a hard hit, should wake up soon. Isabel nodded, sinking into a chair by Jasper's bed. He looked peaceful, too peaceful, his face bruised but soft. She took his hand, her throat tight. I thought you were a liar, she whispered. But you're the only one who's been here. Tears fell, and she didn't stop them. She'd run from him, from trust, but he'd chased her down, bled for her. Her free hand rested on her stomach. The baby. She'd thought it was Trevor's, a chain to her past, but doubt crept in. 6 weeks, the clinic said. That night in the bar, the wild, blurry hours after the chapel. Could it be Jasper? A nurse interrupted, handing her a chart. We ran some tests, she said. You're pregnant, Miss Bennett. About 8 weeks. Isabel's breath caught. 8 weeks, not 6. That meant Jasper, not Trevor. Relief crashed over her, followed by fear. She looked at him, still unconscious. You idiot, she murmured, squeezing his hand. Why didn't you tell me who you were? She'd been so blind, so caught in her own pain. He'd hidden his title, his power, but not his heart. She saw it now, the pancakes, the soup, the way he stood by her. It was all for her. Jasper stirred, groaning. His eyes opened, finding hers. Isabel, he rasped, smiling faintly. She leaned closer, tears spilling. You scared me, she said. Don't do that again. He chuckled, wincing. No promises. She brushed his hair back, her voice soft. You're a billionaire, a CEO, and you let me yell at you in Queens? He shrugged, weak but warm. Worth it. She laughed through her tears, a sound of surrender. I'm keeping you, she said. But no more secrets. His hand tightened on hers. Deal. The door opened and Trevor strode in, smug as ever. Touching, he said, clapping slowly. But it's too late. I've got the bid. You're done, Donovan. Isabel stood, fury blazing. Get out, she snapped. Trevor smirked. Enjoy your little victory. It won't last. He laughed and Jasper squeezed her hand again. Let him have it, he said. I've got what matters. Isabel looked at him, her heart full. He'd given up a fortune, a fight, for her. She sat back down, resting her head on his shoulder. We're a mess, she said. He laughed softly. Yeah, but we're ours. Outside, the city hummed, unaware of the storm they'd weathered. Isabel stayed by his side, the truth settling around them. He wasn't a fool. He was her husband, and she wasn't letting go. Isabel Bennett sat by Jasper Donovan's hospital bed, the beeping of machines a steady rhythm in the quiet room. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting soft lines across his bruised face. He was awake now, his green eyes tired but warm as he looked at her. She hadn't left his side since he'd opened his eyes, her hand still wrapped around his. The chaos of the night before, the gala, the attack, Trevor's threats, all felt distant. What mattered was here, in this moment. She brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, her touch gentle. You look terrible, she said, her voice teasing but thick with emotion. He chuckled, wincing slightly. Thanks. You look beautiful. She smiled, a real smile, the kind she hadn't felt in years. I'm sorry, he said, his tone serious, for hiding who I was. I thought it'd keep you safe. My world's messy, Isabel. Rivals, power plays. I didn't want you caught in it. She nodded, understanding dawning. You're a billionaire CEO who cooks pancakes in Queens. I should have known you were crazy. He grinned. Crazy about you. Her chest tightened. She'd spent so long running from trust, from love. But he'd chased her down, bled for her. No more secrets, she said firmly. Promise me. He squeezed her hand. Promise. The door creaked open, and George Bennett shuffled in, leaning on his cane. His gray eyes softened at the sight of them. Heard you took a beating, son, he said to Jasper. Good thing you're tough. Jasper sat up slightly. Had to be, sir. Couldn't let her down. George grunted, pleased. Call me George. And you, he turned to Isabel, stop fighting this. He's a keeper. She rolled her eyes, but her heart warmed. I know, she said quietly. George patted Jasper's shoulder. Rest up. I want great-grandkids someday. He left, leaving them in a comfortable silence. Isabel stood, pacing to the window. Trevor's got the Hudson Yards bid, she said, staring out at the city skyline. He thinks he's won. Jasper watched her, unfazed. Let him have it. It's just money. She turned, incredulous. Just money? It's your company. He shrugged. I've got enough. Besides, I'm starting something new, a foundation under your name, for kids, families, whatever you want. Hudson Yards will fund it. Her breath caught. He was giving up a fortune, not out of defeat, but for her. You're insane, she said, but her voice cracked with awe. He smiled. Worth it if it makes you happy. She crossed the room, sitting beside him again. I'm pregnant, she said, the words spilling out. 8 weeks. It's yours. His eyes widened, then softened. Mine? She nodded, tears brimming. I thought it was Trevor's at first. I was scared, but it's you. It's us. Jasper pulled her close, ignoring the pain in his ribs. We're having a kid, he said, burying his face in his shoulder. He laughed, burying her face in his shoulder. Yeah, we are. He kissed her forehead, his lips lingering. Guess we're stuck together now. She pulled back, smirking. Don't get cocky. I could still divorce you. He laughed, the sound filling the room. Try it. I'll win you back. Days later, Jasper was discharged. Isabel brought him to her Manhattan apartment, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows. He stood in the kitchen, still bandaged, stirring a pot of soup. You're supposed to rest, she said, leaning against the counter. I am, he replied, grinning. Cooking's relaxing. She shook her head, stepping closer. You're ridiculous. He turned off the stove, facing her. And you're stuck with me. She reached up, touching his cheek. Good. They kissed, slow and sure, the city humming outside. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. That weekend they walked through Central Park, the leaves golden in the late afternoon sun. Jasper held her hand, his grip firm. What's next? He asked. She glanced at him, the man who'd gone from a stranger to her everything. We figure it out, she said. You, me, the baby. No more running. He nodded, pulling her closer. No more hiding. They stopped by the lake, the water reflecting the fading light. Isabel rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the weight of her past lift. Trevor was gone, banished from New York by Jasper's quiet power. Vanessa Pierce had faded into the gossip pages, her schemes forgotten. George was already planning a nursery. Back home, they cooked together, a simple meal of pasta and laughter. Isabel caught Jasper sneaking a taste and she swatted his hand. Patience, she said, grinning. He pulled her into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen. Can't wait, he said. Not for dinner, not for us. She laughed, the sound free and light. They ate on the couch, plates balanced on their knees, talking about names, dreams, the future. It was messy, imperfect, but real. As night fell, they stood on the balcony, the city sprawling below. Jasper wrapped an arm around her, his warmth steady against the cool air. Love's not about knowing everything, he said, his voice soft. It's about trusting through the unknown. Isabel looked up at him, her heart full. You're right, she said, and I trust you. He smiled, kissing her under the stars. They'd started as strangers, stumbled through lies and chaos, but they'd found each other, and that was enough. The room was too white, too still, too clean for someone like her to be waking up in. Tessa blinked slowly, her mouth dry and coated with the bitter aftertaste of regret. Her head pulsed with a dull ache just behind her eyes, and as she shifted beneath the covers, she felt something was wrong. The sheets were far too soft, the mattress too expensive, the silence too heavy. Her fingers gripped the fabric on her body and her stomach dropped. It was not her shirt. It was not her room. She was wearing an oversized white dress shirt, crisp and slightly wrinkled like it had been pulled from someone else's closet. The collar hung wide at her shoulders, and as she slowly sat up, the hem slid against her bare legs. She was not wearing anything underneath, not her jeans, not her tank top, nothing but the shirt. Tessa's pulse quickened as she looked around. The bed she sat on was massive, draped in white linens that shimmered faintly in the early morning light. Floor to ceiling windows looked out over a skyline she recognized instantly. Manhattan. She was in a penthouse, a very expensive one. Chrome fixtures, minimalist furniture, the faint scent of eucalyptus and cologne in the air. Her heart pounded harder. She gripped the edge of the duvet and pulled it over her body like armor, trying to slow her breathing. She searched the room with her eyes, but there was no sign of her purse, her phone, or her clothes. Just the stillness of a life that did not belong to her. Her last memory came in fragments. A rooftop party, her best friend's birthday, laughter too loud against the backdrop of city lights. She'd been hesitant to go, but Rachel had insisted. Just come for an hour. You never go out. You need this. She had agreed. She should not have. The music had been loud, the energy too fast. Someone had passed her a shot glass. Then another. Tessa had never drunk before. Not a sip. The burn of tequila had caught her off guard, but she had smiled through it, trying not to show how quickly her head was spinning. She had laughed at the wrong joke, missed the beat of the game, and wandered to the edge of the terrace in search of air. There had been a voice, low, calm, someone asking if she was all right. She remembered eyes the color of smoke, and then nothing, a blank space, no more memories. Just this morning, this room, this shirt. She stood abruptly, but the motion made her dizzy. The floor seemed to shift beneath her feet, and she had to grip the edge of the nightstand to steady herself. Her breath came in shallow gasps. She had to get out, had to find her things, had to figure out what happened. The door to the bedroom creaked open and she froze. A man stepped in, tall, composed, his sleeves rolled to his elbows, his hair slightly damp, as if he had just come from the shower. He looked at her without surprise. His face didn't change, neither warmth nor judgment, just a quiet, unreadable calm. Tessa clutched the duvet tighter. "I am so sorry," she said quickly, her voice brittle. "I didn't mean to. I didn't know." He raised a hand. "You don't have to apologize. You didn't do anything wrong. You passed out. No one else came for you. I didn't know your name, and I wasn't going to leave you there. I brought you back here." He nodded toward the shirt. "That was the closest thing I had to keep you warm. Nothing happened. I made sure of that." Tessa stared at him. She didn't know what to say. The man standing in front of her was Damien Stonehill. She knew his face. Everyone in New York did. Billionaire, CEO, untouchable. And now she was standing barefoot in his bedroom, wearing only his shirt, with no memory of how she had gotten there. Tessa Grant was the kind of girl most people overlooked. She wasn't loud, didn't dress to impress, didn't occupy space with the kind of energy that turned heads. At 23, she had lived her entire life on the edge of other people's stories, never the center of one. She was a virgin, not because of some vow or moral declaration, but because the idea of being that vulnerable with another person had always felt terrifying. There had never been a first kiss, never a second date. She had grown up in a small town outside of Pittsburgh, raised by a father who worked as a carpenter and a mother who had died too early for Tessa to remember her smile. Her world was quiet, functional, predictable. She liked it that way. Safety to her was not a luxury, it was survival. That was why she kept her head down, worked part-time as a library assistant while finishing her degree in environmental design, and spent most nights sketching layouts for community reading spaces she dreamed of building one day. There was never room for chaos, for indulgence, for anything she could not afford to repair if it broke. That night, at the rooftop party, had been a fluke, a crack in her carefully constructed routine. Her roommate, Rachel, had begged her to come. "Please, Tess, you've been buried in thesis work for weeks. This isn't just a party. It's on the roof of the Stonehill Tower. The Stonehill Tower." She had heard of it, of course. Everyone had. It was the architectural crown jewel of Midtown, sleek, impossibly tall, designed to be a symbol of power and presence. And it was owned by the man whose name carried more weight than most entire corporations. Damien Stonehill. She hadn't expected to see him there. She thought people like that existed in magazines and distant boardrooms, not leaning against railings on their own rooftops. But he had been there, alone, dressed in black, silent while others laughed and drank and flaunted their worth. Tessa had noticed him, but she had not stared. She didn't dare, at least not until she had taken that third shot and everything inside her loosened. She remembered stepping outside for air, shoes in hand, hair sticking to the back of her neck. She had leaned forward, too far, nearly tipping, and a hand had reached out, a firm grip at her elbow, a voice asking if she was all right. It had been him, Damien. She remembered the faint concern in his eyes, the steadiness of his presence. The next moments were a blur. She had laughed. She'd said something dumb, maybe even told him it was her first time drinking. She might have told him more than that. She couldn't remember. Now, standing in his bedroom, dressed in his shirt, all she could feel was the heat of humiliation climbing up her neck. Damien was still watching her, carefully, like a man who had learned to evaluate risk before speaking. His voice, when he spoke again, was calm. "You were alone. You passed out on the rooftop. No one claimed you. No one even noticed you were gone." That last part stung more than she expected. She looked away, biting the inside of her cheek. Why would someone like him care? Why would he bring her here, a complete stranger, and not just call a cab or security? He must have seen the question forming in her mind because he said, "I've seen enough people ignore what they shouldn't. I didn't want to be one of them. That was all." He made it sound simple, like it wasn't strange or intimate or profoundly disorienting to wake up wrapped in his clothes, in his space, in his life. Tessa needed to leave. Her mind screamed it. She didn't belong here. She wasn't the kind of woman who had these kinds of mornings, who became stories whispered about over champagne. She was a scholarship student with 2 roommates and a part-time job shelving books. She had to get out, but her legs still trembled when she tried to move. Damien stepped back, creating space, as if sensing the shift in her. "Your things are in the other room. I'll wait in the kitchen. There's coffee, if you want it." She didn't answer. Couldn't. She just nodded, barely, and watched him disappear down the hallway, footsteps soft, unhurried. The moment he was gone, she exhaled for the first time. Her hands fumbled as she found her clothes folded neatly on a nearby chair, her phone charged and resting on top. No missed calls, no frantic texts, just silence. As she dressed, she tried to collect herself, to rebuild the layers of safety she had always lived inside. But something inside her had already cracked open. Not because she was exposed, but because someone had seen her like that, completely undone, and not looked away. Not taken advantage, not judged. When she stepped into the kitchen 10 minutes later, fully clothed and clutching her phone like a lifeline, Damien looked up from where he stood by the coffee machine. There was no smile, no pretense, just that same unreadable expression. "I'm sorry if I scared you," he said quietly. "You didn't," she replied just as soft. "You surprised me." Their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Tessa turned, opened the door, and walked out of the penthouse without another word. But long after she was gone, Damien remained where he stood, still staring at the space she had just occupied. And for the first time in a very long time, he realized he didn't want that silence to stay. The next 3 days passed in a blur, but not because they were busy. Tessa went to class, checked in for her shift at the library, answered emails, did all the things she was supposed to do. But something was off. She kept replaying the night in her mind, trying to stitch together the pieces she had lost. There was no scandal, no damage done, but inside her chest was a tension that hadn't been there before. Something about Damien Stonehill lingered, not just his name or his wealth or the mystery that clung to him like a shadow. It was the way he had looked at her, not like a girl who had stumbled into his world by accident, but like a question he hadn't figured out how to ask yet. She told herself she wouldn't think about him, that she didn't belong in his orbit, that he had already forgotten her. But she was wrong. Because on the 4th day, he showed up. She was shelving a stack of books in the architecture section when she heard someone clear their throat. She turned and almost dropped the entire stack. Damien stood at the end of the aisle, dressed in dark gray, sharp lines, and clean angles, like he had stepped out of a different universe. He held a coffee cup in one hand and something else in the other. "You left your sketchbook," he said, holding it up. Her stomach flipped. She had forgotten completely. She had taken it with her to the rooftop party, intending to show Rachel a design she'd been working on. Somehow, in the chaos of the night, it had disappeared from her bag. "I figured you might want it back," he said, voice quieter now. And then, after a pause, "I also figured I wanted to see if you were okay." Tessa stared at him. He didn't fit in this space. Not the fluorescent lights or the chipped corners of the bookshelves. He was too composed, too controlled, yet something in his eyes looked unsettled, like he hadn't been sleeping well. "I'm fine," she said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Thank you for everything." He nodded, not moving. "May I ask you something?" She blinked. "Okay, why did you come to the edge of the rooftop that night, alone?" It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't even curiosity. It was something more vulnerable, like he had been there too and was still trying to figure out why. Tessa hesitated. Then she said, "I guess I wanted to feel like I was part of something, just for a night. I wanted to know what it felt like not to be invisible." He didn't react, but his silence felt heavier. "You weren't invisible," he said finally. "Not to me." That made her breath catch, and she hated that it did. She took the sketchbook from his hand, their fingers brushing briefly, and the contact sent a rush of warmth up her arm. "Thank you," she said again. She expected him to leave, but he didn't. "I'm holding a private showing next week. My team's presenting a new concept design for a sustainable public library on the west side. It's closed, but if you'd like to come, I'll make sure there's space for you." She stared at him. "Why?" "Because your ideas are good. I saw your notes. And because I think you need to see what it looks like when your work can exist outside the page." She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. But when he turned and walked away, she stood in the aisle for a long time, her fingers tightening around the edge of her sketchbook, her heart pounding with something that felt dangerously close to hope. The night of the event, she almost didn't go. She stood in front of her tiny closet for half an hour, trying to choose something that didn't scream out of place. She settled on a black dress, simple and clean, paired with the only pair of heels she owned. When she stepped into the lobby of the Stonehill building, she felt like a fraud. But when she walked through the doors of the gallery space and saw Damien standing across the room, his eyes immediately finding hers, she didn't feel small. She felt seen. He didn't walk over right away. He let her move through the space, explore the models, listen to the presentations. But his gaze never left her. And when he did finally approach, it wasn't as a host or a CEO or a man of power. It was as someone who had waited all evening to breathe again. They spoke quietly, off to the side, their words half lost under the hum of conversation. "You were right," she said softly. "About what?" "It's different when you see it out here. I think I needed that." He nodded. "I think you need more than that. And I want to show you." Tessa looked at him. "You don't even know me." He tilted his head. "Maybe I don't need to, not all at once. Maybe it's enough that I want to." That night, they didn't kiss. He didn't ask to see her again, but when she got home, there was an email waiting for her. It was from his assistant confirming a guest pass to Stonehill's private design lab, an invitation to work, to create, to collaborate, not to date, not to flirt, but to be something more than invisible. Tessa accepted the invitation. One afternoon, a week turned into 2. Damien wasn't always there, but when he was, he watched her work from across the room. Quiet, respectful, not touching, not pressing. But something was building. Each moment between them tightened with tension, with the kind of intimacy that had nothing to do with touch and everything to do with presence. He asked about her projects. She asked about his childhood. He told her he hated the press, hated being treated like an idea instead of a man. She told him she hated feeling like she had to prove her worth to be in any room. He listened. She listened. They were learning each other one piece at a time. Then came the day he found her in the empty studio, asleep on the floor, beside her sketchpad, her hair falling across her face, her hand still clutching a pencil. He didn't wake her. He sat beside her for nearly an hour, watching the rise and fall of her breath, wondering when the silence had stopped feeling empty and started feeling like home. He didn't touch her. He just stayed. Later, when she stirred and blinked up at him, confused and half asleep, he said quietly, "I don't want to scare you, but I think I've started waiting for you in ways I can't explain." She looked at him, wide-eyed, her mouth parting as if to speak, but she didn't. Instead, she reached out and took his hand. No words, no declarations, just skin on skin, and the quiet truth that something real was already unfolding. It wasn't supposed to go this far. That was what Damien told himself every time he saw her enter the studio, every time her eyes met his across the conference room, every time she left, and he found himself replaying everything she'd said. Tessa had begun to occupy the quiet parts of his world, the parts he thought were too cold for anyone to reach. She never asked him for more, never pushed, never presumed, but he felt the shift. He saw it in the way his team looked at her now, not as an intern or an assistant, but as a piece of something they didn't understand yet, but knew was important to him. He didn't care, not about the looks, not about the murmurs. What he cared about was the way she softened his day just by being in it. One afternoon, he found her alone on the rooftop garden above the design floor. She was curled up on the bench, sketch pad open, her pencil moving in small, sure strokes. He didn't speak at first, just stood a few feet away, watching her draw. When she noticed him, she didn't startle. She just smiled, small and tired. "I come up here when I need to breathe," she said. "It's quieter than the city." He nodded and sat beside her. "What are you working on?" She turned the sketch pad toward him. It was a design subtle, clean lines, soft curves, a community library, tucked between two narrow buildings, with natural light flooding through rooftop panels. "It's beautiful," he said. "It's safe," she corrected. "It's the kind of place I would have gone to when I was too scared to be at home." That was the first time he asked her something personal. "What happened?" he asked gently. She looked out at the skyline. "My mom died when I was little. My dad tried, but he worked too much. I raised myself. And when things went wrong, I didn't tell anyone. I learned that silence could be safer than truth." Damien didn't push. He only said, "I understand." But something about his tone told her that he did, deeply. "What about you?" she asked. "Where do you go when you need to breathe?" He was quiet for a long time. "I don't," he said. "I just build. I keep moving. If I stop, everything catches up." Tessa looked at him then. "That sounds exhausting." "It is," he admitted, "but it's easier than remembering." A few days later, she asked what he meant. They were walking through Trau, aware me by Aikau Entrei Pame, a private gallery after how hours, a space filled with architectural models he rarely showed anyone. "I was 25 when my father died," he said, "heart failure, but it wasn't sudden. It was years of silence and resentment, years of him blaming me for not following his legacy exactly the way he wanted. We hadn't spoken in months." Tessa listened, her breath still. "I found out from a business partner, not family, not a friend, a man who wanted to buy his half of the company before the body was even buried." He looked at her. "That's when I decided that power would be my shelter. If I owned the room, I wouldn't have to feel what it meant to be left out of it." She touched his arm. Just a gesture. Barely anything. But it made his voice catch. "I don't know how to be loved," he said, the words stripped of any armor. "And I'm scared that if I let you matter more, I'll ruin it." Tessa didn't have an answer, but she didn't pull away. That night they stayed late in the building. She curled up on the studio couch, her shoes kicked off, and he sat across from her, watching the way she absent-mindedly sketched the curve of the city skyline. "You're not like anyone I've ever known," he said. "You don't ask for anything, and somehow that makes me want to give you everything." She looked at him. "You don't have to give me anything. You just have to be real." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then she said, "You've been taught to believe that love has to come with conditions, that it's transactional, but it's not. It's terrifying and messy and completely unearned. That's why it's worth it." Later that week, something changed. Damien was scheduled to attend a private fundraiser, hosted by his board's oldest and most traditional partner. It wasn't just a social event, it was political, strategic. Everyone who mattered in his world would be there. He didn't want to go, but pressure mounted. He received calls, reminders, a nudge from his legal team, and then the final push and arranged introduction to Evelyn Astor, daughter of a powerful East Coast family, heiress, connected, perfectly poised. A woman who had grown up in the same circles, attended the same schools, breathed the same air. "She'd be a good match," one board member said bluntly. "Someone who understands the demands of your position. Someone who fits." Damien said nothing. He didn't attend the fundraiser. Instead, he took a long walk through the city and ended up outside the library where Tessa was working a community shift. She didn't see him at first. She was reading to a group of children, her voice animated, her face lit with purpose. He stood in the back, unnoticed, listening to her, watching the way she gave everything to that moment without asking for anything in return. He realized then what he had to do. The next day, he declined the Astor introduction officially. It made headlines. Billionaire CEO rejects high society match. There were murmurs about strategy, speculation about motive, but he didn't care. For the first time, he wasn't playing the game. That same evening, he showed up at Tessa's apartment, not in a suit, not with an entourage, just himself. He knocked. When she opened the door barefoot and surprised, he said simply, "I'm choosing this. You. Not because you fit into my world, but because you remind me there's another one I want to live in." Tessa stared at him, eyes wide. "You don't have to say that." "I'm not saying it for you," he said. "I'm saying it for me. I don't want a future that looks good in a press release. I want a future that feels like this, like truth, like breath." She stepped aside and let him in. They didn't kiss that night. They didn't sleep together. But when he held her hand in the quiet of her small living room, surrounded by books and secondhand furniture and the scent of burnt coffee, she realized that love didn't always come wrapped in fairy tales. Sometimes it came as a man who looked like power but touched like vulnerability. And sometimes the most extraordinary thing wasn't the story, it was the fact that he stayed. It had been 2 weeks since Damien stood in Tessa's apartment and told her the truth. 2 weeks since he chose her not as a statement, not as a rebellion, but as a quiet, undeniable fact. During those weeks, their relationship settled into something that felt real, in a way neither of them had ever experienced. There were no grand declarations. There didn't need to be. He called her when he had 5 minutes between meetings just to hear her voice. She dropped off small things at his office, a thermos of tea, a printout of an obscure design she knew he would like. They didn't see each other every day, but when they did, time bent. It wasn't about quantity, it was about presence. He began inviting her into his space more. First the private design floor, then late dinners in the quiet corners of his home, and eventually the rooftop garden that no one else seemed to use but him. They talked about work, fears, dreams. She told him about the nonprofit she wanted to build, how it terrified her. He offered to fund it. She refused. He smiled. That was when he knew she really was different. It wasn't just attraction anymore. It wasn't even infatuation. It was something quieter, deeper, something neither of them had words for, but both felt growing by the day. And it was exactly that intensity, that quiet intimacy, that made the moment of their undoing so inevitable. The first true step beyond the line they had tiptoed around for weeks came late one night. She had spent the evening helping him review designs for a new public atrium he was developing. They were on the floor of his penthouse, surrounded by blueprints and half-empty coffee mugs. Her hair was in a loose braid, and she was wearing one of his oversized sweatshirts because she had spilled tea on hers earlier. He watched her as she bent over the page, pointing to a detail on the south-facing wall. The light caught her face just right, softening her expression, and something inside him cracked. "You don't realize how beautiful you are when you're working," he said, voice lower than usual. She looked up startled, a soft laugh escaping her lips. I'm covered in ink and I haven't washed my hair since Tuesday. I know, he said, and you've never looked more like someone I could fall in love with. She stared at him, eyes wide. For a moment, the air between them held everything: fear, longing, permission. Then she reached for his hand. He moved slowly, deliberately, like he was afraid to startle something fragile. He leaned in just enough to brush her lips with his, and when she didn't pull away, he kissed her fully, gently at first, then deeper, like he had been holding back every word he hadn't yet spoken. She melted into him, her fingers sliding into his hair, anchoring herself to something real. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Every movement from that moment forward was unhurried, full of quiet reverence. He lifted her onto the couch, their bodies never separating, and touched her like she was both sacred and known. She shivered beneath his hands, not from fear, but from the kind of surrender that only happens when you know you are safe. "We don't have to," he whispered against her skin. "We can stop whenever you want." She looked up at him, eyes steady. "I've never wanted anything more." "You're sure?" "I'm sure." He nodded, forehead against hers, his breath shaking. He took his time, undressing her like he was unveiling a secret, not taking a prize. She didn't hide. She didn't shrink. For the first time, she let herself be seen fully, without apology. She had never done this before, had never trusted someone with this much of herself. But in that moment, wrapped in Damien's arms, she didn't feel afraid. She felt like herself. They moved together slowly, discovering each other through touch and silence, through gasps and whispered names. When their bodies finally came together, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't cinematic. It was human, raw, and real. She held his face as he moved within her, and he pressed a kiss to her shoulder like a vow. Afterward, they lay tangled together on the couch, the city lights casting quiet gold patterns across their skin. He stroked her hair in silence, and she rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart beneath her ear. "I didn't know it could feel like that," she murmured, "like being chosen instead of taken." He kissed the top of her head. "I didn't know I could feel like this at all." But the world outside didn't sleep. The next morning, Damien received a call. His board had scheduled an emergency session. His refusal to consider the Astor family proposal had unsettled some key investors, especially after a tabloid photo surfaced of him and Tessa leaving his building at midnight. It wasn't scandalous. It wasn't intimate. It was just a moment, her stepping into a car, his hand on her back, her face turned toward him in soft laughter. But it was enough to spark questions, enough to open the door, enough to draw a line between his world and hers. "You're under scrutiny," his lawyer told him. "If you continue to be seen with her, you'll face questions, doubts. You're building a multi-billion-dollar expansion. Donors don't like unpredictability." He didn't tell Tessa. He didn't want to make her feel like a liability. But she knew something had changed. He became quieter, distracted. He still called, still showed up. But the warmth in his voice had dulled around the edges. One night she confronted him. "You're pulling back," she said. "Why?" He looked at her for a long time, then said, "Because I'm scared they'll use you to hurt me." "You mean they'll use me to hurt your image?" "No," he said quickly. "I mean they'll hurt you, they'll dissect you, they'll twist everything about you to make you look like something you're not." "Then fight them," she said. "Don't run from me." "I'm not running," he replied, but even she didn't believe it. Not entirely. The next morning, he skipped his board meeting. He flew to the foundation headquarters and withdrew his pending negotiation with the Astor Group. He stood before his board and said, "I won't be told who I should love to make the numbers look better. If that means losing a few clients, so be it. I'll build something better." It wasn't a calculated move. It was a risk. And he took it for her. That night, he showed up at her door again, soaked from the rain, no umbrella, no driver, just Damien. "I'm tired of pretending this isn't the most real thing in my life," he said. "I don't care about the fallout. I care about the fact that you make me want to wake up tomorrow with more than just a balance sheet in my chest." She stepped aside, tears in her eyes. "Then don't run again." "Never," he said. And this time when she kissed him, it wasn't hesitation. It was home. They thought that was the hard part. The decision. The declarations. The moment when Damien stood in front of his board and said no to the life they expected of him. But real love doesn't peak in the dramatic choices. It gets tested in the slow unraveling that comes after. For a while, things were good. More than good. They were real. Tessa started coming by the office regularly, not as a guest, but as a presence. Damien cleared a desk for her in his private studio. She worked quietly, sometimes on her own sketches, sometimes just reading or helping him review design drafts. They didn't pretend she was a consultant or a client. They didn't need titles. They were building something together, something softer than business and stronger than words. He called her sunshine when he was exhausted. She called him ridiculous when he got too serious. He stopped working after midnight. She started sleeping better. It felt like peace. But peace, when you're not used to it, can feel like walking on ice. The cracks don't show until you're already slipping. The press quieted for a while, but the silence didn't last. A new article dropped, subtle in tone but sharp in implication. It wasn't about scandal or sex. It was about stability. A trusted business magazine published a profile questioning Damien's recent decisions, pulling out of the Astor merger, restructuring key partnerships, making what the author called emotionally driven choices inconsistent with his professional legacy. The piece wasn't cruel. That made it worse. It was calculated, dignified, and full of quiet contempt for the idea that someone like him could be undone by someone like her. Tessa read the article in the break room of the community center, where she still volunteered once a week. The photo of Damien was flattering, taken from a recent charity gala, but the caption beneath it stung. "From boardroom beast to unpredictable partner, has love softened the CEO's grip?" She didn't cry. She didn't even tell him she saw it. But that night, she didn't sleep beside him. She stayed at her own place, made up an excuse about early meetings. He didn't push. But he knew. The distance between them wasn't about lack of love. It was about fear. And for someone like Tessa, fear had never been passive. It always had consequences. A few days later, she started canceling plans. Just small things. At first, a coffee run, a visit to the rooftop. Then she stopped coming to the office. "Just a lot on my plate," she said when he called. "I'm fine." He offered to come over. She said no. "I need some space to think," she told him. "About what?" he asked. "About who I am when I'm not your someone." The silence that followed was heavy, not angry, not cold, just full of the kind of ache that comes from two people who don't want to drift apart, but don't know how to hold on without breaking each other. For a week, they didn't talk. Damien threw himself into work like an addict. Meetings, site visits, pitch decks. He stopped sleeping again. The penthouse lights stayed on past 3 a.m. His assistant noticed. His team noticed. Blake noticed. "You're not fine," Blake said one morning. "You can't build a future with someone and then disappear the second things get hard." "She left," Damien said flatly. "Maybe because she didn't think she had a place here anymore." That sentence hit him harder than he expected, because somewhere in the rush of declarations and decisions, he had forgotten that love doesn't erase self-doubt. It exposes it. Tessa had spent her entire life learning how to survive without help. Now she had to learn how to survive with it, and Damien had to let go of control to let her choose him freely. So he didn't chase her, but he didn't retreat either. Instead, he sent her a message every night. No pressure, no guilt, just one sentence. The first night, I'm still here. The second, I miss your laugh when I say something that isn't funny. The third, I saved your desk. Your pencils are exactly where you left them. She didn't reply, but she read every word. She started sketching again. Late at night, when she couldn't sleep, she filled her notebook with lines she didn't know the meaning of. She drew him once, not his face, just his hands. Strong, open, reaching but never grabbing. On the 8th night, she left her apartment and walked the 8 blocks to his building. The doorman let her up without a word. When the elevator opened into the penthouse, Damien was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, barefoot, making tea. He looked up and didn't speak. She held out the sketchbook. I didn't leave because I stopped caring, she said. I left because I needed to know if I could still breathe without you. And? He asked. I can, she whispered. But I don't want to. He stepped toward her slowly. You don't have to prove anything, Tessa. Not to me, not to them, not even to yourself. She shook her head. But I want to. I want to stay, not just when it's easy. He nodded. Then stay. She dropped the bag she was carrying. But I need one thing from you, she added. No more protecting me by deciding things for me. If there's pressure, if there's fallout, I want to face it with you. Don't shut me out to shield me. Let me choose. Okay, he said. Then here's my choice. I want you in every room, even the ones that weren't designed for you. Especially those. She stepped into his arms, and this time there was no fear, just warmth, just decision. They didn't fix everything that night, but they started. Together. In the days that followed, Damien began including her in decisions that affected her. He invited her to a stakeholder meeting not as decoration, but as a speaker. She talked about her vision for accessible design, for projects that served people, not just profit. At first, the room was quiet. Then someone clapped. Then another. By the end, people weren't questioning her presence. They were asking when she'd speak again. The press continued, but the tone shifted. The same magazine that had doubted Damien ran a new piece titled, The CEO Who Listened Why, Human, Centered Design Might Be the Future. Tessa's name wasn't in the headline, but her fingerprint was everywhere. Damien didn't give another dramatic speech. He didn't make a statement. He just kept showing up. For her. With her. And slowly, the noise faded. Not completely, but enough. One evening, as they stood in the rooftop garden, watching the sky melt into gold, Damien reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I wrote this the night you left, he said. Didn't send it. Didn't think I should. Read it, she said. He unfolded it. You changed the way I breathe. You made me stop looking at numbers and start listening to silence. If I lose everything else, but still have you, I think that might be enough. Tessa smiled, tears slipping down her cheek. It is. They stood in the quiet, wrapped in something stronger than passion. Love born not from a perfect beginning, but from the decision to stay through the fire. And in that fire, they had become something unbreakable. It was 6 months later when the world seemed to finally stop watching. No more headlines, no more boardroom whispers. The foundation Damien had built continued to thrive, but something had changed in how he led. He paused more, listened longer. He said no to 3 international partnerships, not because they weren't profitable, but because they didn't align with the values he and Tessa had come to believe in. He said yes to things that made less financial sense, but carried more human weight. A community arts center, a vocational design program for underfunded schools. Tessa helped him shape them all. She never asked for credit. He never needed to give her any. Everyone knew. She had become more than his partner. She was his compass. Tessa didn't leave her roots behind. She kept her old apartment for a while, even though she spent most nights at Damien's place. She still worked at the community center on Tuesdays, still brought her own coffee to meetings because she hated office brews. But she stood taller now. Her sketches had been picked up by a publisher for a small design book focused on human architecture. A phrase Damien insisted she trademark. When it launched, he didn't throw her a lavish party. He took her to the tiny diner she once told him felt like home. Over burnt toast and cold tea, she whispered, "This life still feels borrowed sometimes." Damien looked at her across the table and said, "Then I'll keep reminding you it's yours." One evening, as they walked home through the city that had tried to break them, Tessa paused in front of the building where it all began, the penthouse, where she woke up wearing only his shirt. She looked up at the sky and whispered, "Do you think we would have found each other if that night hadn't happened?" Damien stepped closer. "I think we were always going to find each other. That night just made us look sooner." She smiled. "It's funny. It started with a dare, a bottle too many, a mistake maybe." He nodded. "No, it started with a girl who'd never been kissed, getting drunk for the first time, trying to feel alive." She looked at him, "and ended with me finding a place I never thought I deserved." He took her hand. "That's the thing no one tells you about love. You don't earn it. You choose it, and then you keep choosing it every day after." They didn't get engaged that year. They didn't post photos or hold press interviews. They just built a life, moment by moment, the way real things are built. Sometimes Damien still woke up before dawn and watched her sleep, her face relaxed, her breath soft. Sometimes she caught him looking and whispered, "Still here?" And he'd smile and say, "Always." They had arguments, about furniture, about schedule clashes, about who forgot to buy groceries, but even in their worst moments they never walked out of the room. They never let the silence grow too long. They had learned that staying didn't mean perfection. It meant willingness. It meant remembering that love isn't loud. It's the quiet decision to keep showing up. One morning, Tessa found a note taped inside her sketchbook. Damien's handwriting, a little messy, a little rushed. It said, "You weren't the plan, but you are the reason I finally stopped pretending I needed one." And that became their truth. Love didn't come in a storm. It came in a mistake, a slip, a kiss, a shirt too big on a girl too new to love. And somehow, through all the chaos, through the fears, through the pressure to become something more acceptable, they had become something real. Because in the end, love doesn't need to be loud, it only needs to be true. The music was too loud, the shots too strong, and the dare far too stupid. But none of that stopped Layla Quinn from climbing into the elevator of the Lexington Grand Hotel at nearly 2 a.m. with a drunken smile on her face and a mission in her heart. "Top floor," her best friend slurred, pressing the button with a giggle. 1 hour, no chickening out. Just crawl into an empty bed and pretend you're someone with zero self-respect. Layla was not the kind of girl who usually accepted dares. She was quiet, practical, and painfully private, the type who color-coded her planner and still slept in cartoon pajamas. But tonight was different. Tonight was a blur of heartbreak and tequila. She had just walked in on her ex-boyfriend of 3 years, kissing another woman in their shared apartment. Apparently, "We're on a break" translated to, "I've already moved on." So when her friends dragged her to a downtown birthday bash, she didn't resist. When the drinks were lined up, she didn't say no, and when the dare came up, she just laughed, like someone who had stopped caring for a night. "Penthouse," she whispered to herself, stumbling out of the elevator. The hallway was silent, carpeted in velvet red and lined with gold wall sconces. She checked the numbers, heart pounding with both adrenaline and alcohol. At the end of the hall, a door stood slightly ajar. No noise, no light. She slipped inside. The suite was massive. Everything screamed wealth. Leather couches, city skyline, champagne chilling in a silver bucket. She ignored it all. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she was already halfway in. The dare was clear. Crawl into the bed. Stay an hour. Leave before sunrise. The bedroom was darker than expected. Moonlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. The bed was huge, the sheets turned down like it was waiting for someone. She hesitated only for a second before pulling off her dress, folding it over a chair, and slipping beneath the cool, expensive sheets. This is insane, she thought, but the bed was warm, and the mattress cradled her like a secret. She curled into a ball, closed her eyes, and whispered a shaky laugh. 1 hour. Just 1 stupid hour. She never heard the front door open, never saw the man who stepped into the suite. He moved like he owned the world, because he did. Julian Wolfe, billionaire investor, walked into his penthouse expecting silence and solitude. He didn't expect to find a girl asleep in his bed, naked, hair splayed across his pillows like she belonged there. He stared at her, unmoving. Most people would have shouted, called security, demanded answers. Julian simply loosened his tie, exhaled slowly, and walked to the opposite side of the bed. Layla stirred, but didn't wake. He pulled back the sheet, slid in beside her without touching, and lay there with eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Something about the way she slept, so vulnerable, so unaware, made him feel more alive than the last $10 million deals combined. And that was before she opened her eyes. Layla Quinn had always lived on the edges of life, never the center of attention, never the girl with the loud laugh or the perfect hair. She was quiet, observant, and more comfortable behind a sketchpad than a dance floor. Growing up in a small Pennsylvania town, she'd learned early that the world didn't offer second chances to girls like her. Her mother worked double shifts at a diner, her father had walked out before she turned 10, and Layla had spent her teenage years balancing school and side jobs just to pay for community college textbooks. She didn't complain. She survived. That was enough. At 22, Layla had moved to New York on a scholarship to a local design institute. She shared a 1-bedroom apartment with 2 other girls, took freelance gigs when she could, and rationed every dollar. She was careful with her heart, more careful with her body, and had never trusted easily. Until Devin, her first real boyfriend, her first everything. 3 years wasted on a man who promised permanence but gave her betrayal. Walking in on him kissing a coworker 2 nights ago had shattered something deep. She didn't cry right away. She went silent. Then her friends dragged her to a party. And now, here she was, in a billionaire's bed, naked. But she didn't know that yet. She awoke slowly, consciousness tugging her upward through layers of warmth and cotton. For a moment, she thought she was in her own bed. Then she smelled the sheets. Not the familiar cheap detergent scent of her apartment, but something richer. Cedar, leather, faint whiskey, masculine. She turned over and froze. There was a man lying next to her. He was facing away, shirtless, broad shoulders rising and falling with each slow breath. His hair was dark, slightly tousled, and even from this angle Layla could see the sharp cut of his jawline. She gasped, bolting upright and grabbing the sheets to cover herself. The motion woke him. Slowly, he turned his head. Their eyes met. Gray, cold, piercing. He didn't look confused. He didn't look angry. He just looked amused. "You're not my usual wake-up call," he said, voice low, smooth like velvet over steel. Layla's mouth opened. Nothing came out. He sat up, stretching lazily. "Don't scream. I hate noise before coffee." She blinked. I thought this was an empty room. I didn't know." Julian Wolfe studied her. really studied her. Not just the disheveled brown hair or flushed cheeks or the oversized sheet clutched to her chest, but the fear in her voice, the kind that didn't come from being caught, but from being vulnerable. "Who dared you?" he asked calmly. Her face flushed deeper. "It was just a stupid game. I didn't think—" "You clearly didn't," he said, standing and walking toward a sleek black robe. He moved like someone who had never apologized in his life, confident, effortless, dangerous. Layla looked away, only to glance back when he spoke again. "You can keep the sheet," he said, "but get dressed. I want to talk." "Talk?" she repeated, confused. He turned to her then, fully dressed now, arms crossed. "You broke into my penthouse. You slept in my bed. And you're still here. You're lucky I'm not pressing charges." Layla scrambled for her dress, cheeks burning. "I'm sorry. I'll leave. Right now." He didn't move, just watched her pull the fabric over her head with shaking hands. "What's your name?" She paused. "Layla." He nodded once. "I'm Julian." She already knew. Everyone knew the name Julian Wolfe. Billionaire, venture capitalist, silent killer in the finance world. He'd taken bankrupt tech startups and turned them into empires. He had no public romantic attachments, no scandals, no weaknesses, until now. As she rushed to the door, he said one last thing. "Come back tomorrow, 10 a.m. Layla froze. "What?" "I want to talk," he repeated, "about why a girl who clearly doesn't belong in a place like this ended up here." She turned slowly. I didn't mean to." "I know," he said, his voice quiet now, "but you did." And Layla, for reasons she couldn't explain, nodded. Layla didn't sleep that night, not because she was afraid, though fear did curl at the base of her spine like a quiet animal. It was something else, a pull she couldn't name, the look in Julian's eyes when he told her to come back. It wasn't anger, it wasn't lust, it was curiosity, dangerous, hungry curiosity. The next morning, she almost didn't go. She sat on her mattress in the cramped apartment she shared with 2 roommates, staring at her phone as it ticked closer to 10. Every part of her told her to forget it, leave the city, find another design program, disappear. But something made her dress. Nothing fancy. Just jeans, a white t-shirt, and the only pair of clean sneakers she had. She braided her hair to keep her hands from shaking and took the subway to Lexington Avenue. The lobby of Wolfe Tower was nothing like she'd ever seen. Marble, glass, silence. Everything gleamed. Everyone moved fast, dressed in black or gray, holding phones like weapons. She felt like an ink blot in a black and white photograph. The receptionist looked her over once, then nodded. "Mr. Wolfe is expecting you." That alone nearly made her trip. She was led to the top floor, a private elevator that opened directly into his office. It was more like a museum than a workspace. Steel and glass, a massive desk, floor-to-ceiling windows that made the sky look close enough to touch. Julian stood by the window, hands in his pockets. "You came," he said without turning. "I don't know why," she admitted. He turned then, slow, deliberate. "Because something about last night shook you, same as it did me." She didn't reply. He gestured to a chair across from the desk. She sat, hands folded tightly in her lap. "I'm not here to interrogate you," he said, "but I want to understand." Layla took a breath. "It was a dare, that's all. My friend's birthday. They thought it would be funny. I didn't know anyone lived there. I never meant to invade." "You didn't invade," Julian said. "You exposed." She looked up. "What do you mean?" He walked toward her, slow, every movement calculated. "That room has been empty for 5 years. No one's ever touched that bed, not since." He stopped, eyes flickering. "It doesn't matter." Layla tilted her head. "Why didn't you kick me out?" He leaned against the desk. Because you looked like you needed to be there more than I needed you gone. Silence stretched. Then he said, "You've never done anything like that before." It wasn't a question. She nodded. "I don't drink. I don't party. I don't even jaywalk." Julian almost smiled. "And yet you ended up naked in my bed." She flushed. "You don't have to keep saying that." "But it's true," he said, eyes locked on hers. "You were vulnerable, unprotected, yet somehow you weren't afraid. Why?" Layla looked away. "Because for a second I didn't feel invisible." That made him pause. "You're not invisible." "Most of the time I am," she said. "But lying there, I felt like I mattered, even if it was just for an hour." Julian watched her carefully. "You matter." The words landed heavier than they should have. He said it like a man who rarely said anything without calculation, but this sounded different. He stepped closer. "You don't know who I am, do you?" "I know your name," she said, "but I don't know your story." Julian sat across from her. "That's the first honest thing anyone said to me in years." From that day on, Layla came back every morning, not for work, not for money, just to talk. They started with coffee, then questions. He asked what scared her. She said failure. She asked what haunted him. He said silence. He asked what her first kiss was like. She said awkward and forgettable. She asked if he ever loved someone. He said once. And then never again. They never touched. Never crossed that line. But the tension was there, unspoken, constant. Julian started changing his schedule to fit her visits. Layla started sketching in his office while he worked. One morning, he looked up from a call and saw her sleeping on the couch, curled up like she belonged. He ended the call early and just watched her. Another time, she brought him lunch. Homemade pasta in a plastic container. He ate every bite. "You're the first person who's fed me without expecting a deal in return," he told her. She smiled. "Then you're welcome." They were orbiting something neither of them could define, until the night it almost broke. Julian had a charity gala. He invited her. No pressure. Just come. She borrowed a dress from a classmate, simple black satin, hair tied back, no makeup, just a little lip gloss. When she stepped into the lobby of the hotel, Julian froze. "You clean up well," he said. She rolled her eyes. "Don't get used to it." They didn't talk much during the event. Too many eyes, too much attention. But every time their gazes met, something passed between them. Toward the end of the night, she slipped away to the balcony. He followed. "You look uncomfortable," he said. "I'm not used to pretending," she replied. He stood beside her. "Neither am I." She looked at him. "Then why do you do it?" He was quiet. "Because pretending is easier than being seen." Layla's voice was soft. "I see you." He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time he reached out, not to grab, not to possess, just to hold her hand. It was electric, warm, real. No one said a word. They didn't have to. The days after the gala passed like fragments of a dream Layla didn't want to wake from. Her mornings started with coffee in Julian's office, soft conversations that wandered between mundane and meaningful. Afternoons were filled with quiet companionship. She still had freelance work and classes, but somehow he always found a way to fit her into his day. He never touched her beyond that night on the balcony, but his eyes did, constantly, like they were always trying to memorize her face, the shape of her laugh, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when nervous. Layla didn't understand what was happening. Julian Wolfe was a man carved from stone, untouchable, immovable. Yet when he looked at her, he seemed undone. She began noticing things. His hands trembled slightly when he poured coffee. He flinched when a car alarm went off outside the tower. He never let anyone close except her. One Thursday, the elevator stalled on the 42nd floor. A jolt, a flicker, and then nothing. Layla gripped the railing, breath catching. Julian reached for her without hesitation, wrapping an arm around her waist. "I've got you," he murmured. "I hate small spaces," she whispered. "I hate feeling helpless," he replied. They stood in silence until the lights returned and the elevator resumed its ascent. When the doors opened, he didn't let go, not until she looked up at him and said, "You're shaking." So was he. Later that evening, they sat across from each other in his living room. The penthouse was dimly lit, warm with the glow of city lights. "I want to ask you something," Layla said. Julian nodded. "Why me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood and walked to the bar, poured himself a drink he didn't sip. "Do you remember the first thing I said to you?" Layla smiled faintly. "Something about not being your usual wake-up call." He nodded. "What I didn't tell you is that I hadn't slept in that bed since the night my fiancé died." The room stilled. "She was in a car accident," he continued. "Hit and run. She was on her way to meet me. We'd argued earlier that day. I told her she wasn't enough, that she didn't understand my world. She left angry. She never came back." Layla's throat tightened. "Julian, I blamed myself. Still do." He looked at her now, eyes raw. "That bed became a shrine to silence. And then you walked in, uninvited, bare, real." He stepped closer. "You didn't just lay in that bed. You cracked something open, something I thought I'd buried." Layla's voice shook. "You think I replaced her?" "No," he said gently. "I think you made me remember what it feels like to want to live again." They stood a breath apart, silence louder than any confession. Then he added, "But I'm not ready to love." Layla looked at him. "And I'm not asking you to." He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "But I need you near, even if I don't know what to call it." She closed her eyes. "Then don't call it anything." He smiled, soft and fleeting. "You're dangerous." "I'm nobody," she said quietly. "You're the first somebody in a long time," he replied. From that night, they entered a rhythm neither dared define. Layla never moved in, but she was always there. She kept her world small and separate, still taking the train, still cooking her own meals, still attending her design program. But every evening, without fail, she returned to him, sometimes to talk, sometimes to sit in silence. Once, he fell asleep with his head in her lap while she read Neruda aloud. She didn't wake him. Another time, she left a sketch on his desk, him standing at the window, shadows across his jaw, loneliness captured in ink. He framed it. They didn't kiss, they didn't sleep together, but their intimacy was undeniable. Then came the envelope. Layla found it slipped under her apartment door. No name, no return address. Inside was a glossy photograph her, stepping out of Julian's penthouse, hair messy, shirt borrowed, a timestamp in the corner, and a note. "You're not fooling anyone. He always trades up." Her hands trembled. She didn't tell Julian, not that night, not the next, but her eyes gave her away. He noticed. "Something's wrong," he said quietly. She shook her head. "Nothing. Don't lie to me." So she told him about the photo, the note. Julian didn't speak for a long moment. Then he said, "It's starting." "What is?" "The whispers, the digging. They do this every time I get too close to anyone." Layla felt the chill creep in. "What happens now?" He looked at her. "Now I protect you." "I don't need protection." "Yes," he said softly. "You do. Because I didn't see it coming. And that's on me." The next morning, her name was on a gossip blog. No headline, just an anonymous submission. "The girl who broke into a billionaire's bed." Is he finally losing control? Layla stared at the screen, her coffee untouched. Julian pulled the article offline within hours. His legal team moved fast, but the damage was done. People whispered. Her classmates stared. Her professors stopped calling on her. Layla stopped going to class, stopped drawing, stopped visiting him. Julian sent messages, called, waited outside her building. She didn't respond until the 7th night when she found him sitting on the curb near her apartment. No driver, no suit, just Julian, real, tired. She sat beside him. "I thought you left," he said. "I did," she replied, "but only because I didn't know who I was anymore." He looked at her. "You're Layla, the girl who dared to lie in my bed like she belonged. The girl who never once asked for anything. The girl who made me feel." She blinked fast. "I didn't mean to change you." He reached for her hand. "You didn't change me. You reminded me that I still could." Silence fell, soft, warm. She asked, "What do we do now?" He exhaled. "We stop pretending this isn't something." Layla nodded. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I," he said. And then, for the first time, they kissed. Slow, careful, unapologetic. A beginning built on everything they were afraid to lose. The kiss changed everything, not because it was dramatic or passionate or cinematic. It was the opposite, quiet, intentional, almost fragile, as if both of them were holding their breath, afraid the moment would shatter if they moved too fast. Julian pulled back first, but only slightly, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm and shallow. "I've thought about this," he murmured. "So have I," Layla whispered. "But I didn't think it would feel like this." He tilted his head just enough to look into her eyes. "Like what?" "Like a decision I'll never be able to undo." His hand slipped down to her waist. "Then don't undo it." She didn't. That night, she didn't go home. They returned to the penthouse together, not saying much, but speaking through the silence in a way only they understood. The suite was dim, familiar now, no longer a place of intimidation, but one that knew her scent, her presence, the sound of her laughter. She stood by the window as he loosened his tie, watching the city glitter below them like fallen stars. "You still haven't asked me to stay," she said. Julian looked over, slow and steady. "Because I was waiting for you to want to." "I never wanted to leave," she replied. He stepped behind her, close but not touching. "Then don't." Her body tensed, not from fear but anticipation. She had never done this. Never crossed the boundary from curiosity to intimacy. But tonight, it wasn't about proving anything. It was about allowing something. Allowing herself to feel. Allowing herself to trust. Julian reached for her slowly, his fingers brushing her arm with the gentleness of someone who knew he was holding something breakable. She turned to face him, her breath shallow, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the collar of his shirt. "I don't know what I'm doing," she said, half laughing. He stilled her hands with his. "Neither do I, but we'll figure it out together." That was the permission she needed. They moved in sync, not with urgency but with reverence. Each button undone, each layer shed, not as conquest but as communion. When he kissed her again, it was slower this time, deeper, more deliberate, like he was memorizing her mouth. When his hand found the small of her back, she didn't flinch. She leaned in. When her shirt fell away, she didn't hide. She looked him in the eye. "I know," he said gently. "I won't rush." She smiled faintly. "I'm not afraid of the pain. I'm afraid of what happens after." Julian pressed a kiss to her forehead. "After, you'll still be Layla, and I'll still be me, but maybe a version that's finally learning to feel again." They didn't rush. They undressed slowly, unpeeling tension with every touch, every breath, every look. Layla touched his chest with tentative fingers, as if mapping out a place she wasn't sure she had the right to explore. He traced her jaw like she was a sketch he'd never finish. When their bodies finally met, it wasn't perfect. It was hesitant and raw and real. She gasped at the closeness, not just physically, but emotionally. No barrier, no defense, just her and him and the gravity of something too big to name. He moved with care, with patience, with something bordering on reverence, and when she whispered his name, not from pain, not from fear, but from trust, he closed his eyes just for a moment to hold the sound. Later, wrapped in sheets tangled from their quiet chaos, they lay side by side. Layla rested her head on his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her cheek. "I didn't expect it to be like that," she said softly. "Like what?" "Like being seen and touched at the same time." Julian ran his fingers through her hair. "That's because no one ever bothered to earn both." "You did," she murmured. "So did you." He didn't sleep. Not at first. He stayed awake long enough to watch her fall into dreams, her hand still curled over his heart. He thought about the first night she appeared in his bed, uninvited, and how strange it was that the girl who arrived by accident now felt like the only thing that belonged. Over the next few days, something shifted, not just between them, but around them. Julian canceled 2 international trips, delegated meetings, chose her over the empire for once. Layla moved through the world softer, but more solid. She smiled more, doubted less, until the storm came. It started with a headline. "From dare to mistress, billionaire Julian Wolfe and the virgin who stole his heart, and maybe his mind." Layla stared at the article, her stomach twisting. Her name wasn't mentioned, but the photo was clear. Her stepping into his car, her walking beside him, laughing, unaware of the camera, and worse screenshots of her private art page, her sketches. The one she drew of Julian, exposed. Julian's team moved fast again, but this time the blog wouldn't take it down. They had sources, anonymous quotes claiming she seduced him, that he was losing control, that she was manipulating the man who never fell. Layla shut down her website, deleted her social media, stopped returning calls. Julian found her curled on his couch, knees to her chest. "It's not true," he said. She didn't look at him. "Doesn't have to be. They believe it anyway. I'll fix it. You can't fix the way people look at me now. Then let them look. I don't care." "I do." Her voice cracked. "Because I didn't want to be your scandal." He kneeled in front of her. "You're not." "Then what am I?" she whispered. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took her face in both hands, his thumb brushing a tear from her cheek. "You're the only person in this world who made me want to be better, and I'm not letting them take that away." "So what do we do?" she asked. "We stop hiding," he said. "We stop pretending that this is temporary." She swallowed. "Then say it." "I love you," he said, "and not because you ended up in my bed, but because you made me want to leave the bed and live again." She leaned into him, eyes full of disbelief and something deeper. "I love you too," she whispered, "but I don't know how to protect this." "We protect each other," he said. "That's how." And when he kissed her again, it wasn't fragile anymore. It was a vow. It didn't take long for everything to fall apart. The media frenzy escalated faster than Julian's team could contain it. News outlets dug into Layla's past, her scholarship records, her part-time jobs, even her family's financial history. Headlines used words like gold digger and accidental heiress. Layla's professors pulled her aside, suggesting she withdraw until the attention faded. Her classmates stopped looking her in the eye. Stores near her apartment whispered when she walked in. The girl who had once been invisible now felt dissected, judged, unwanted. Julian tried to shield her. He tightened his legal grip on the press, launched privacy lawsuits, and even offered to move her into another city until it passed. But Layla refused to run, until the rumors began affecting him. His board raised concerns. Investors threatened to pull out. One executive asked outright if Julian had gone soft. Julian silenced him with a look, but the damage echoed. One evening, Layla stood on the balcony of the penthouse, arms wrapped around herself. The city stretched out below, glittering and heartless. Julian stepped behind her. "We'll get through this," he said. She shook her head. "You're losing everything you built. It's just money." "It's not," she said, turning to face him. "It's your life, and I don't want to be the thing that ruins it." He reached for her hands. "You're the only part of my life that makes sense." Her voice was quiet. "Then why does it feel like we're holding our breath?" Julian didn't answer. Because she was right. Every day since the article dropped felt like walking on glass. And she saw it, no matter how hard he tried to hide it. That night, Layla packed a small bag. Just a few things, enough to disappear. She left a note on the kitchen counter, no explanations, just 3 words. "I'm so sorry." When Julian woke and found it, something inside him cracked open. Not the part that knew how to fight back or strategize or negotiate, the part he had built walls around for years. He didn't call his team. He didn't call security. He drove himself across the city, visiting every bookstore, cafe, and art supply store he remembered her mentioning. He didn't find her. Days passed. The media moved on. But Julian didn't. Not inside. His penthouse felt hollow, his bed untouched, his shirts hung perfectly pressed, but he hadn't worn anything but black in a week. He started carrying her sketch in his briefcase, a copy folded and worn. One rainy Thursday, he received a package. No return address. Inside was the necklace he had given her, silver, simple, with a single tiny star. Beneath it, a note. "This was yours before me. It shouldn't remind you of pain." That night, Julian walked into his office and told his assistant to cancel everything. Indefinitely. "Are you stepping down?" she asked. He paused. "I'm stepping into something I should have chosen a long time ago." A week later, Layla sat on the porch of her aunt's house in Maine. A book in her lap, her hair pulled into a loose braid. She hadn't heard from Julian, hadn't expected to, but she still looked at her phone every night, just in case. That afternoon, a black car pulled into the gravel driveway. She didn't move, not until she saw him. Julian stepped out, no suit, no tie, no entourage, just him. He looked tired, and real, and hers. "How did you find me?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "You left your birthday marked on my calendar," he said. "And I figured, if you didn't want to be found, you wouldn't have done that." She smiled faintly, tears stinging her eyes. "You gave everything up." He stepped closer. "Not everything, just the things that never really mattered." She stood. "Why are you here?" Julian didn't hesitate. "Because I loved you when you were naked in my bed, without knowing who I was. And I love you more now that you've walked away knowing exactly who I am." She stared at him, heart racing. "I was never supposed to matter this much." "You were never supposed to be a dare," he said, "but you became my truth." The wind tugged at her hair. The book slipped from her fingers and landed on the steps. "What now?" she whispered. He reached for her hand. "Now I stop pretending I know how to do this perfectly, and I start showing up anyway." Layla stepped into his arms. "Then don't leave." "I won't," he said. And this time, she believed him. 3 months later, the world had moved on. The headlines faded. The whispers died, and Julian Wolfe reappeared in the business world with a quiet fire in his eyes and something softer in his voice. He didn't apologize for stepping away. He didn't explain his absence. He simply returned with Layla at his side, not as a statement, not as a scandal, but as a truth he no longer cared to hide. She no longer lived in shadows. She walked beside him through boardrooms, charity events, and art galleries, her head high, her eyes steady. The girl who once felt invisible had become the woman who anchored a man the world thought unshakable. She didn't change herself to fit his world. He adjusted his to make room for hers. On the 6-month anniversary of the night she lost that dare, Julian took her back to the same hotel, same elevator, same penthouse, but this time the bed wasn't empty. It was made for two, and on the pillow was a single envelope. Inside, not a marriage certificate, just a note. I never believed in accidents. Until you. She turned to him, laughing softly. This is where it started. Julian kissed her shoulder. No, this is where I began. They lay there side by side, the city glowing beyond the windows, and it wasn't about wealth or image or lust anymore. It was about the way she looked at him like he was just a man, and the way he held her like she was the only thing he'd ever truly earned. They didn't need to say forever. What they had was more honest than vows, more permanent than signatures. They had survived the noise. They had chosen each other when it wasn't convenient. And they had learned that sometimes it's not the mistakes we make that define us, but the courage to stay when things get hard. As the night deepened and the silence wrapped around them like a promise, Layla whispered the words that started it all. I still can't believe one stupid dare led me here. Julian smiled against her skin. Sometimes the wrong bed leads you to the right person. And in that moment, they both knew the truth. Some stories don't begin with fairy tales. They begin with chaos, with vulnerability, with a naked heart in the wrong place at the right time. And those, more than anything, are the stories worth keeping.